Hi, my name is Ryan Payton, and I'm a designer at a company that I started called Camouflage in Seattle, Washington. Before that, I was working at Microsoft on the Halo series, and then before that, I was living in Japan, working on Metal Gear Solid, specifically Metal Gear Solid 4 with that team, and I lived in Japan for 5 years. So it's been a good ride, and just really excited to see what happens next with us. Yeah, for me, Shenmue is one of those seminal games in my life, right? One of the games that really changed the way I thought about, the game industry, what I want to do in the future. Specifically, when the first Shenmue came out, I imported it from Japan, and I was a college student at the time, studying Japanese. So I ended up using Shenmue as a Japanese learning tool from my college dorm room in the Seattle area. And so I was able to learn lots of interesting words via Shenmue. I remember specifically, like a lot of the characters were using like this term like a kashira, and I was always curious like what does that actually mean? But it really just brought me back to my time as an exchange student living in Japan. That was in the 90s, but even the architecture is very similar even though the game is set in the 80s. So even just walking around those towns in Shenmue just really brought me back to when I was a high school student visiting Japan for fun. The way that the Japanese have their last names right in front of their houses on the street and things like that. All the details and stuff like that just really made me think about, wow, it's amazing how far games have come. It's amazing how immersive this game is. Most creators, wouldn't, or studios would never go to the bother with this kind of details that Yu Suzuki and his team put into the game, and that really just left a lasting impression on me. Other kind of interesting, memories when it comes to Shenmue is, playing it, in Japanese. Really getting that full experience, and then playing into English and seeing like how it was translated. Seeing the different things what English and having a full understanding of the story, what it brought to me, and it really just got me hooked in terms of I wanted to know what happened next. So when we saw that Shenmue 2 was coming out, really got excited. And I'm just a fan. Personally, I'm just a huge fan of really epic, big things. When you look at my favorite games of all time, whether it's Metal Gear or Halo, those are the games that I love. I'd love to be kind of associated with. And so the scope and scale of this multi-chapter universe that I had read in these magazines, these Dreamcast magazines, about what Yu Suzuki was creating was just so inspiring to me. And when it comes to, for example, when it comes to Shenmue 2, again, importing it from Japan, I couldn't wait until it was translated into English. And just seeing, again, even the larger scope and scale of the game, set in Hong Kong and Aberdeen. But what I really liked about that game was, one, that the focus of the story seemed really significant. But more importantly, I consider the fourth disc of Shenmue 2 to be one of the greatest video game experiences of all time. And I'm sad that I think not as many people played it as it deserved to be played. Seeing it's the final disc of the game, it's near the end of the game. And that's when you're going to the forest with Shenhua, and you're just out there helping deer and being in nature, and it's just such an interesting, strange experience. I think coming from when you mostly are playing video games, you're just very busy shooting things, or scoring basketball hoops or touchdowns or whatever. But just walking and having a nature tour with these two characters that you care about, to me was just such a impactful experience. It really made me think about what's possible with video games and storytelling. So, for hardcore gamers like myself, especially back in the 90s, your main source of information was not so much online, it was these magazines, right? So Dreamcast magazine and EGM and all these different magazines was my central source to find out what is actually, what's coming, what's new, what kind of Dreamcast game can I look forward to. And when I first heard about what Yu Suzuki was doing, that it was before I even think they had the project name, the Project Berkeley. It was just labeled as a virtual fighter RPG, and to me that instantly hooked me, because I like fighting games, but I'm much more about story and the fusion of game design and story. And so when I heard about and I read about the ambition of the title, I was instantly hooked. I wanted to know more about it, and that to me, more so than racing or fighting, that was the game that I really wanted to see what Yu Suzuki was going to do. So because the game is of such great scope and scale, it obviously took a long time for the game to come together, and one of the avenues they took to get people ready for the experience was this disc called What's Shenmue, and checking that out was also just it just whetted my appetite even more about that. Again, just for the scope of what they're looking to build just seemed like unreal to me at the time. And even looking back and going back and playing the game, it's still ridiculous what they ended up building. Again, like the attention to detail and everything. So yeah, I just have the utmost respect for, I think, what Yu Suzuki and the team was looking to do. And the influence of the game, I think, is very clear when you look at where games are right now in 2015. And I look at it as like one of those projects that just like really touched me on a personal level and really inspired me to like want to make a career out of something in the game industry.